Okay, so I think we can start. Welcome to my presentation. What I will talk about today, it's going to be Specflow. I hope everyone hears me okay. So if not, please write something in the chat. So the entire presentation is going to be about me and my team journey with Specflow. So we kind of started 1 year ago a project where we had to use Specflow and the BDD, and this is how we do it. The most important thing is that I want all of you to understand that I'm not going to sell Specflow to you, so I'm not going to emphasize Specflow. It's just the way we did it, and hopefully it will help everyone or anyone that tries to use it. And I will have in the presentation a few tricks and tips that probably if I knew it before I started, I would have finished it implementing much faster. So yeah, who am I? So just for you to understand the presenter, my name is Stefan. I'm in QA business for probably 16 or 17 years now. I was initially a manual QA, and then for the last 8 years, I'm an automation engineer. The majority of projects that I was involved in had covered lots of technologies. So I started with a bit of Python, then Java, a bit of PHP later on, and now for the last year, it's C#. From my point of view, I think for any QA automation, it's not important the language you are coding, but the amount of involvement and the quality of the test that you're writing using your technology or your programming skills. So enough about me. I'm not famous. I'm not going to be probably. Hopefully I will. What triggered the Specflow decision? So how did we get to the Specflow? And what was the most important thing for us when we considered Specflow as a framework? So first of all, our client was mostly Microsoft. So everything that he had, and he has even right now, it's based on Microsoft. They have all their employees trained for Microsoft, and they are ASP or C# or Azure DevOps in terms of DevOps, and anything related to this. And then the second decision was that we encouraged our clients to use behavior-driven development. The only tool that was using behavior-driven development was Specflow. And even more, the third thing that triggered our decision was the flakiness of the old framework tests, the maintenance that was really hard, and the poor reusability of the functions from the old framework. Yeah, having this, Specflow is the only one that covers everything. So after short research, we find out that Specflow has to be the one, and that's pretty much it. So having this in mind, we kind of agreed on these 3 items for the next steps. So initially, we had to convert everything from the old framework, which was an NUnit framework with C# to the new BDD framework. That's on the technical part, and our job to convert it to the new framework. And then on top of that, we had to train the entire team because it's a new cultural change and everything has to be changed. Whenever you move to a behavior-driven development, you have to understand that from first from the QA perspective, then development, business analysts, product owners, and everyone have to understand how it goes and how a team in Agile has to function. And then the last one was to create the pipelines, the continuous integration to match whatever they had at that point, and probably even more. So having all these three items, we had to proceed. And here is the story of the last year and how we performed. So back in October 2019, we started actually the BDD journey. Previously in September, we had I'll show you in the next slide. We had an assessment process where we had to understand exactly what was the old framework doing, what we had to migrate, and everything related. And then from October, we started implementing the Specflow. We started creating documents and presentation based on BDD and training the team. Oh, and one more thing that I probably forgot. Also the idea of migrating to BDD was because the customer wanted to make all his QAs, which were probably 80% was manual testers. They wanted them to create also automation. So in this process, with many cultural, because the client has offices in multiple countries like we have, so there is a cultural thing involved as well. So probably we had also to train each of them and to show them how BDD is working and how BDD is going to be implemented and easy to use. More than this, in the storyline, back in January, we had a proof of concept ready. So the Specflow was mostly implemented with most of its capabilities. And also we had a few scenarios ready, or tests, however you want to call them. But then in March, we had the blueprints and all the documentation related to how to use the framework. Okay, then in May, we had like 200 tests already migrated, and it was the entire project, old test cases they had. So we were somehow in the finishing process, and we could say that the migration and the transition to BDD was complete and to Specflow. And then from May until now, it was mostly a fight with the pipelines. So with the help of the DevOps, we had to implement all the old pipelines and to create them with Specflow. And yeah, now everything is ready. Probably back in July, start of August, we had everything ready in terms of pipelines. And from then until now, we also started other client projects to migrate to Specflow and to have them covered. So in terms of coding and framework only, this was the timeline process. So initially, we had an assessment of the old framework, as I was speaking before. And then it was the refactoring the old utils, which is, from my perspective, is the most important thing. Utils, it's it's a wrapper on it's a wrapper on Selenium. But since our client has only UI tests, the utils can contain also API from my perspective and our perspective. But it was like 3-4 sprints for us to just refactor all the utils and see whatever was built wrong there, what were the clicks on elements and all the DB utils, for example. Wherever we saw some possible issues, this refactoring process was also an optimization process. And then after having the utils ready, we had to migrate the page objects. So migrating page objects was not easy. even if probably most of the automation engineer that have experience with page objects, and since it's also C# would say that it's easy peasy, but actually in the real process, it was pretty difficult because we had to understand also, and we had to see that the locators were correct, or not even the locators, but the functions were written with validations in them, which from my perspective, it's not the greatest. Validation should only be at the scenario level or the step definition level. And then the last part was, of course, the creating of the feature files or the test cases in anything else but BDD. Okay, having everything in place now, we had to decide which runner we have to use for our test in the pipelines. Or on local, it's pretty simple. It's not so much of a headache, but in the pipeline, we have to understand exactly how we want to run the test. So our decision after many weeks of research was Specrun. I have to mention that we tried also XUnit and NUnit, but for whatever we needed, it was Specrun. Just because it offers lots of default capabilities and has default report, which is really nice. And we only have to enhance that with a few touches here and there. And then what we thought initially is going to be something, how can I call it? Something really easy, because Specrun is also actually developed by the same team that developed Specflow. Unfortunately, the team of Specflow and Specrun, it's actually one man. That's the downside and the worst case scenario. If that man disappears anyway or quits his job, it's going to be difficult. But for the minimum level of running tests and nothing fancy that you want to develop with Specflow, Specrun is just enough. And then I marked here in the presentation with red the most important things for us, because these are the negative ones for Specrun. It's, yeah, for our experience with C# and Microsoft, this one has so many Nugget packages dependencies that you really need to pay attention to them. And even more, as I said earlier, the lack of support, can be really awful. But then again, we used to have in the old framework a synchronization between Azure DevOps test cases and NUnit test cases. You are able to match them, and whenever you run in pipelines, you had to run the test plan. And while running the test plan, it was automatically filling with pass or fail the test cases in Azure DevOps. But here, using BDD and Specflow, we find out, like in probably 2 months of investigation, that this is not possible easy. So we had to create some workarounds for this. We had to use the Azure DevOps APIs just for this update. Yeah, initially our mobile team saw this capability. So thank you, Bogdan and Bubu, for that. And then we imported that in the web as well, and it was smooth actually. It's not quite as we desired, but it's still doable. So if you have this problem in the future and you want to implement Specflow with Specrun or anything else, it doesn't matter, because this synchronization and automatically updating test cases, statuses, can be done through Azure DevOps APIs. Yeah, here in the right, you can see the Specflow runner tags or whatever capabilities it has, and you can use them. We used a lot of this filter because filter it's good to I mean filter what it does. Filter uses tags, so whenever you tag a scenario, you can filter the entire profile. I'll show you later how it's done. The entire profile, and you can run that profile, and only those tests with those tags can be executed in the pipeline. Sorry. Then I will have to present you the actually framework, the framework details based on the entire conversation that I was showing you. But this is how we did it. And we found it really helpful for us. And we have only one solution. And initially, it was just these two projects, the BDD project, or however situational you want to call it. It's your business side, your project, which will contain actually all the business processes or your feature files, which are the scenarios, the hooks, the step definitions, page objects, actually page objects first, then step definitions based on the page objects, and the profiles and runner and the run settings. This is probably, or actually you can also include if you have queries, yeah, or anything related to the business side of the project. So if you have also, for example, not only UI testing and also API testing, you can have your endpoints in here, because probably, and I would recommend that the logic and the utils of APIs should be in the utils project that I will talk about further on. So the utils project, we called it the backbone because since it's a wrapper over Selenium, all the interaction and everything, it's done in this project. So whatever Specflow is doing, we kind of enhance it. Specflow, no, sorry, the Selenium, we enhanced it, and we added logs and some other logics, like, for example, a simple click in Selenium. We enhanced it to first wait for the element, adding a console log or something to have in your logs the actions, and then the click itself, with a lot of covering the exceptions and everything. So that's why we needed this. And even more, here is the logic for the WebDriver and how we select the WebDriver based on the environment, the browser settings, and all kinds of stuff related. Yeah, as I said, can be extended to APIs. We don't have APIs in our project right now, but can be used, and you have your APIs. And something that I really wanted to told you, and probably I think I forgot, I'll go back to the BDD project. It's the fact that something smart happened while developing this Specflow. We found out that the container configuration, this folder right here, contains actually the entire logic of AutoFac, which is a process, or we wanted to get rid of the old page factory and initializing objects everywhere with new page and new objects and everything. So this is I always forget the name, but somehow I have to find it. It's the yeah. So probably besides AutoFac, there are a few other options AutoFact being a Nugget package. There are other options that can do that, but yeah, we chose this. Seems pretty simple. The only downside of it is that all the pages and all the utils will have an interface in the class, So actually you will call the interface instead of the class, but we found it really easy. So each page will have the constructor based on all these utils that you require or you need in your class. Okay. Then, yeah. Then the pipelines. So pipelines, it's another story. It's a huge one. Probably I'll need another presentation for the pipelines. And I won't have anything prepared. I don't have anything prepared for pipelines, like in showing you how we did it, but I will only speak about it because it's an entire process. It's something that it's not only depending on QAs, and also you have to understand some DevOps techniques, and also DevOps involves probably even developers. So the challenge for us was that previously, after the assessment, we saw that the pipelines were running test plans in the old framework. So whenever in pipeline you build your code and then run the test, it was not actually running the test, but running a test plan. So all the test, or the old test had a link between a test and the scenario from, or the test from the TFS, Team Foundation Server. And then when you have this link, you can choose the test plan to run it, and all the statuses of the outcome of the run is going to be automatically populated in Team Foundation Server. So that was something pretty nice. And as I told you, this is not possible in Specflow unless you use the API of Azure DevOps. But then whatever we did was to find workarounds and to see how we can do this for the pipelines. So at first we tried with SpecRun, and with SpecRun we found, as I showed you here, let me go back if it lets me. Yeah, the profiles and the runners. So whenever we decided to, for example, the default profile, it's the actual regression. So whenever you go in the pipeline and build your project, your solution, and then select to run your default profile, is going to run all of your scenarios, all the feature files. Because we have nothing in the filter for the run setting, and also for the profile. So this will run in everything. So you can play around with these profiles, and whenever you create a pipeline, you have to choose which profile, and if it's something really complicated, you only have to modify it in here. So we wanted this process to be less dependent on DevOps. So we wanted to control it somehow, and the only control that we can have it's from here, from the code and from the profiles or runners, or run settings, sorry. Yeah, so this is the way that we did it. And then we found out that we cannot update the test cases in TFS, in Team Foundation Server. So then we chose XUnit. We tried XUnit, and with XUnit, it changes the entire logic, but because you no longer have these profiles, and you have command lines that you can trigger the test with. So even though XUnit provide the option to link your scenario to the TFS scenarios, whenever you run them in pipeline, it's not possible to have them automatically updated for their statuses. So yeah, having this, we had to move forward and have a solution. and that's why you use the Azure API for this. It's not that complicated. The only problem probably for this is that Microsoft decided to use this to build this API, and the lack of support from Microsoft on this side kind of put us back a few weeks or sprints. But other than that, it's doable, and it's something that you can you should try and see for yourself. Probably it's a trial and error process for sure. It was for us. The only thing that I recommend is don't get involved too much into these details. Try to build something simple, not like we did, because that will complicate your things, and it will provide you an ETA longer than expected. So having this set and then running different profiles for the pipelines was kind of everything that we needed. And in the hooks, we added the logic of updating test cases in TFS. It was something based on the scenario context and scenario output. If it's pass or fail, then it was the only place where we could add this capability of updating test cases. Well, having this probably pipelines, I can consider them ready at this stage. Can be improved for sure. If I haven't looked into the questions so far, I'm so sorry. I should have said before that. Okay. So yeah, that was pretty much everything that I had. So if you have any questions at this point, please go ahead. I'm open for answers and questions, of course. I'll try to answer. If I don't have time right now to answer all of your questions, I'm sure that I will provide later on. Okay. Okay, what type of project is in this example is being tested with BD? Yeah, probably it was an earlier question, and I think I already answered. It's a web one, but can be extended to anything that it's actually, it has the interaction with Selenium, because we have everything. It's based on UI experience, but it doesn't have desktop capabilities or mobile capabilities. That has to be enhanced further on for those capabilities. But for now, it's only web, and it's only UI. We have started a few APIs for this, but it's still in the early processes, and we don't have too much to discuss about it. But probably it will be, because in this industry, everything now, at least in new projects, depend on APIs. So everything has to contain APIs, from my perspective at least. So if you have any other questions, please go ahead. Okay, Sergio, for your second question, if I have any code examples, I have, but because of the non-disclaimer agreements, I cannot provide anything from that. So that's why my screenshots were only high level. and I cannot. But anyway, if you have any detailed questions, I can reply to them on private with the details that I can. If that answers your question, yeah, there's no public repo or something like that for Specflow. Unfortunately, that was the biggest challenge for us as well, because Specflow doesn't have that much support, and since it's not an open source like Cucumber, for example, everything becomes harder. But yeah, now probably we have some experience, not the experience that we wanted, but we have some. Yes, Fayas, I will answer live for this. This framework can be extended probably to Appium. We had a discussion with our mobile team, because the mobile team is using another framework, and probably these two can be merged. API testing, we did it. I mean, I did add some capabilities for the updating the test cases statuses using the Azure DevOps API. So we have sort of some APIs, and I decided to use the, how is it called? Rest Assured, but for C#, it's Rest Assured, yeah. So can be extended, but for Appium probably can be extended, but it could be something separate. So it should be probably another project inside the solution that we can use. Oh, and something that I really forgot to tell you, the utils at this point, we create a NuGet package out of it just for control purposes, and we don't want anyone to mess with it. And yeah, that's a recommendation for me, for anyone that uses something that really wants to keep it as it is and don't allow an entire company, because companies right now have hundreds and thousands of employees. But if you give access to modify to all the QA automation to something, I don't recommend it. So if it's something that really you really rely on it, like this backbone, yeah, keep it in a NuGet package and control it from just a few members that have access to that. And create tasks whenever you need to modify something for your project. I hope I answered your question, Fayas. Okay, Sergio, I'm looking at your question right now. We are working on a mobile app with Xamarin Forms, and we want to also use BDD with Specflow and UI test. Do you see any impediments we could have? Well, yeah, there will be a lot of impediments, just because Specflow not being an open source, you won't find the answers on the internet. So you either contact someone with previous experience on Specflow, or you will have to enhance your ETA or provide higher ETAs for the definition of done process, and whenever the Specflow framework is going to be ready. But probably it's doable. I haven't tried it. I don't have an exact answer for you, but impediments you will have. We had impediments, even though we for example, like 1 month ago, I started a new project for the same client and to migrate everything to Specflow. And since I had the experience of last year and everything was just perfect until then, perfect, yeah, with the impediments that we had and everything that was pushed later on because we weren't ready with the framework. I thought that 1 week is just enough to have the Specflow ready, and it wasn't that easy. It wasn't the case. It was another, yeah, but it depends on the environments and everything and the configuration files that you use. But impediments probably you'll have, depending on how much you want to complicate things for your project. But it's not something that you cannot overcome. Thank you. Any other questions? I think we are almost at the end of the time, right? So if you have any other questions, let me know. I will have this presentation public, and I forgot to add my LinkedIn, but I will do it here just to ask me whatever you want related to Specflow, and hopefully I will be able to answer your question. Okay. Yeah, Fayas, I see another question of you. Are there any open source framework for BDD in .NET? I think not. So I've tried and I searched for everything, but Specflow, it's kind of the only one. Yeah, unfortunately. But I'm open for any suggestion. If anyone comes and says, look, this is a tool that it works with .NET, then so that's why I'm a bit reserved on this answer, but my investigation end up with Specflow at no time. Thank you. No, Sergio, I don't have anything like that. So no blogs, nothing. Now, unfortunately, we wanted to document all the impediments, but physically there was no time. Yeah, probably. Okay. Anyway, thank you for your suggestion. It's a good one. I will try to do that. It's something that you learn with experience. So I will do that. Thank you, guys. Yes, I will provide an email and everything. I will modify the presentation, and the presentation is going to be public, probably with the my LinkedIn and everything, all the details that you need. Thank you. Thank you for your patience. I hope I made myself clear. I'm not such a good presenter, but thank you.